Thank you, Lisa. That's so kind of you. Unnecessary, very kind. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm so glad that you are here. I want to say a special hello to the kids out there. This next program, this next speaker and her presentation is for everybody, but I think we'll have some new participants in kids coming up, and I'm so glad you're here. This event is part of a whole festival, which has shown me already this morning that we're so lucky to live in an area with so many writers. And I also want to let you know that the summer library program is coming up as summer approaches. And the theme this summer is Imagine Your Story. So think about, with all these writers presenting, what's your story? What kind of story do you want to share? And I hope you participate with us at the library. So I've got my strawberries ready. I hope you do too. And let me, without much further ado, let me introduce the speaker. Deanna F. Cook is the best-selling author of the cooking class series, All for Kids, including Baking Class, Cooking Class, and Cooking Class Global Feast. She wrote her first book, The Kids Multicultural Cookbook, when she graduated from Colby College and received a Watson Fellowship to travel around the world and collect recipes from kids. After that, she was a magazine editor for many years. First at Scholastic, then at Disney's Family Fun, where she often shared kids' recipes on TV, like on Good Morning America, The Today Show, the Food Network, and more. She is now a children's book author and acquisitions editor for Story Publishing here in Western Massachusetts. She lives here in our region and can be found online at deannafcook.com. She's got a wonderful website, so if you want to check that out, please do. Now, during her presentation, she's a little bit away from the cameras, so she can't see the questions that you want to ask. But notice at the bottom of your screen there, or have an adult help you, there's a Q&A function. And if you'll type your questions in there, then I can pass them on to Deanna while she helps us all make strawberry shortcake. So without further ado, please let me hand it over to this very special guest, Deanna F. Cook. Welcome.
Hi, it's so great to be here. And thank you, Matt, and the Northfield Library for inviting me. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. I'm sure all of you are sorry that we couldn't do this in person, but it's actually kind of fun to bring you right into my kitchen. I'm in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I love cooking here, and I make all of my cookbooks right in this kitchen. And today I am going to teach you how to make strawberry shortcake. And we're so lucky because strawberries are in season right now. I just went to our local farm stand, Crimson and Clover, and I picked up strawberries. And here is one of them. But I also noticed today that some of the pick your own farms are open too. And if you haven't been to pick your own farm, it's so much fun to just kind of go there and bring your containers and bring some water to drink and pick some, and a mask right now, obviously, and just pick some berries. And the best berries are like the smallest ones. And the fresh ones right now are so much better than the ones that you would get like in a regular grocery store. So I highly recommend picking and eating and making strawberry shortcake with them. So this recipe is sort of three-part. We're gonna make a biscuit, which is like the little shortcake. And then we're gonna make a little fresh strawberry sauce, and then we're gonna make whipped cream. And as Matt said, I'm the author of lots of children's cookbooks. Here's one. I think the words are backwards, but this is called Baking Class. And if you want to, you probably can pick it up at the library, and it has step-by-step directions on how to make all the recipes. And they're all made by kids, and they work, and they're really easy. So I hope you pick up the book. So what we're gonna do first is, you always wanna make sure you're like wearing an apron and pull your hair back and wash your hands. And we're gonna preheat the oven to 350. And it's always important to get the oven kind of warm before you start baking, because if you just stick your baked good right in the oven, it might sink. So it's really important to get the heat up nice. So if you have a piece of paper, you could write down some of these ingredients. But we're going to start with 1 3/4 cups of flour. So I'm going to start with the big cup measuring. And what you want to do when you're measuring flour is to always use this kind of level off like a knife so that you get a really precise measurement. See that? So that's 1 cup. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 cup and then a 1/4 cup, and that will make 1 3/4 cup. So, and again, I'll just level it off like that. And baking is really like a science. So you have to kind of measure correctly, otherwise it won't work. Cooking is a little different. You can wing it a little bit more, but baking is more of a science. So, so that's the 1/4 cup. So we have 1 3/4 cups of flour in there. And then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of sugar. And this is basically a biscuit recipe, but it's a lot sweeter. Like, as you can see, there's sugar in it, because this is something that strawberry shortcake is for the dessert. So I've got 3 tablespoons there. And then we are going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We've got a little 1/2 teaspoon measurement here. And salt is kind of a flavor enhancer. It just like brings out all the flavors in the biscuit and makes it just taste good. So you always want to add a little bit of salt. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of baking powder. And this is the leavener. Like this, when baking soda, baking powder reacts with the liquids and then with the heat, it makes it rise. It creates like little air bubbles so that the biscuits, the shortbreads, are nice and fluffy. And I'm just going to whisk that together. Those are our dry ingredients. And then I'm going to take 4 tablespoons of butter and just cut it. I soften this just a little bit, just so that it's a little easier to work with. And I'm just going to take 4 tablespoons. I'm just going to kind of cut it up and stick it in here in chunks. So that it's a little easier. We're going to mash the flour and the butter together to create kind of a little crumbly beginning of the dough. So there. And so I'm just going to take this. This is a pastry cutter. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but these are great for making biscuits and doing a lot of cooking. And you just kind of want to, I don't know if you can see into my bowl, but I'm just breaking up the butter so that it's in little tiny pieces, so it's nicely spread throughout the dough here. And if you don't have one of these, although these are great to get, and they don't cost a whole lot of money, you can get them at any kitchen supply store, or I even saw them at the Williamsburg General Store the other day. You can get them there, but if you don't have that, you can just use a fork and a knife and just kind of push it in together. So we've got that till all the butter kind of disappears. So we've got that all disappeared. See that? And then we're going to add a 1/2 cup of milk. I'm just going to pour that in. And then we will stir that up. Let's see. There we go. Yeah. And the great thing about cooking is that it's kind of a springboard for learning about all kinds of things like math and science, even where food comes from. And it's also just a fun activity, and it's great to do if you want to celebrate somebody's birthday, or you want to show a teacher it's the end of the year that you're kind. You can make something for them, or right now a neighbor maybe who's shut in, who can't get out, that kind of thing. So okay, so I'm going to stir it a little, and then I've got this nice beginning of the dough. I'm just going to kind of knead it in the bowl. See that? Oh, it's so much fun to knead. I wonder if any of you have ever made any bread before. This is a much easier, it's similar to making bread, but it's a quick bread, so it's a lot easier to do. Just going to do that. And I'm going to make a nice ball with it. So I can toss it up in the air a little bit. There we go. Okay, you just kind of want to pat it. And then I'm going to put this in the sink just to get it out of the way. And bring it over here. And we're going to pat it. Just knead it a tiny bit and then pat it into kind of like a big pancake. So, there you go. And I started cooking when I was young. My last name is Cook, so I kind of grew up thinking, oh, I should learn how to cook. And my siblings always, like, they loved to watch TV. And for some reason, I wasn't so into watching TV. So I used to always make them things while they were watching TV. I'd make cakes and cookies and snacks and things like that for them. Okay, then I'm just gonna pat this to about a 1/4 inch thick. It's pretty thin there, see that? And then I'm gonna use a round cookie cutter and just go ahead and cut this out and cut out these shortbreads. And you can also make a mini shortbread if you want to, shortcake. You don't have to make them big. You can make them different sizes. This is just a little, this kind of is a fun round cookie cutter. I don't know if you can see, but it has edges, so it's a little bit of a flower shape. And this was actually my grandmother's cookie cutter. I have her whole collection of cookie cutters, which is so much fun. Whenever I bake with them, I remember her. So, and then I'm gonna place the shortbread just on an ungreased cookie sheet like that, and space it a little bit apart. And you can nibble this dough if you want to. It doesn't have any raw egg in it. It's just basically butter, sugar, and flour, and it tastes pretty yummy. And these are gonna go, this one's a little thick, so I'm just gonna pat that down a little bit. And interestingly, with the butter in it, and on a hot day like today, when my hand is warm and when it touches it, it kind of like melts it a little bit. So it's actually better to keep the dough cooler, but and to keep the butter a little bit cooler, especially on a hot day, so that you have nice layers within your shortbread. But it's too hot, it's hot today, so we're just gonna make do. And then you pick up the scraps like that, and then you wanna do that again, and you just keep going until you've used up all the dough. And then this just gets tossed right into the oven and cook it for about 10 minutes. And I think we're gonna have time to see when it comes out of the oven too. So I'm gonna do a couple more here. Have any of you ever made shortbread before? Sorry, shortcakes before. I would say shortbread. It's different, shortcakes. I remember as a child, my birthday is in June, so I often asked for strawberry shortcake for my birthday instead of a regular cake. There we go. So you can see these all right there. See that? I'm just going to toss those right in the oven. The preheated now to 350. And I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. Yeah, and we'll let that bake. And while that's baking, we're gonna make the strawberry sauce. So what I've done is I've already rinsed the fresh berries that I had gotten from the farmer's market this morning. And you wanna rinse your berries just before you use them. You don't wanna rinse them and then put them in the fridge because they can get moldy. So it's better to just keep them in the fridge right when you pick them and then rinse them right before, but don't rinse before you put them in. And then we're going to hold them, and pulling a strawberry means basically cutting off the green part, the end right there. And we're just gonna do that with a knife. And you can compost the holes. Got a little bit of water in here for just clean off my desk. And yeah, and you just go ahead and slice it up. And if you're working with little kids, like with toddlers or preschoolers, you can actually use a plastic picnic knife for that and just let them cut it like that. And then they can cut it up. This is actually a really great activity to do with kids at a preschool or a daycare center, or if you have little ones at home, because they can eat them as they're making this little strawberry sauce too. And cooking is a great way to kind of spend time together as a family. I love when I cook with kids to kind of hear what's on their mind, what they're thinking about. They open up a lot more when they're just sitting there. And Oh, the strawberries smell so good. Right now, everything's so fresh. And then we just cut up 1 to 2 pints. And you kind of want to do this a little bit in advance because you want to create a little sauce. So probably if you're doing this at home, you want to first do the strawberries and then make the biscuits, because you kind of want to give about an hour for the strawberries. We're going to put a little sugar on it to kind of get a little soupy and nice and syrupy, because that syrup tastes so yummy on the shortcake. So just going to keep cutting up here. Yeah, and you could probably use a couple of pints to make enough for this batch of strawberry shortcake. And I know strawberries too are great to try growing in your backyard. If you could have a little strawberry patch. They're a little tricky to plant and to grow, but having it right there in your patch is just wonderful to be able to run out and see when the first strawberries in the season are ripe. My brothers and sisters and I used to have a little contest every year to see who could find the first strawberry in the garden of the season. So, and right now it's so great to support all of our local farms and to eat locally. We have wonderful farms. We're so lucky to live in the Pioneer Valley where we have so many great farms and strawberry farms. This new one in Northampton is called Strawberry Fields, and it's open right now for pick your own, but it's a beautiful setting down in the meadows in Northampton, kind of near the airport. And it just opened. I saw today was the first day, so today was opening day there for pick your own. And they are organic strawberries, and organic is important to buy if you can, because regular strawberries have a lot of pesticides. So if you can buy organic with strawberries, it's definitely an important food to get, organic versus regular. So, and working with knives, you know, I used to give my kids, when they turned about 7, I would give them their own paring knife. After practicing a lot with this plastic picnic knife. And once you master using the plastic picnic knife, you can really learn to use a paring knife just carefully. And it's great for kids to use real tools. And a 7-year-old can definitely use a paring knife. So, and you can gauge it. And if you feel like that's too young for your kids, you can wait a little more. But it's so much fun to see them when they do actually get to use a real knife to cut something and make something. They always feel so proud of their creations. So there we go. So we have a pint of sliced strawberries. Smells so good. I'm going to put this in the sink. I'll compost that. I have a big compost in the backyard. Put this in the sink too. And I'm going to add a couple of, I think about a tablespoon of sugar per pint would be good. Just going to put that right in there. Ooh, it's sweet. It really brings out the juices too. I mean, you don't have to add the sugar if you don't want to, but it creates more of a juice. I guess you could use a little bit of like orange juice or something if you want to get it syrupy. But see how it's not quite syrupy yet? This, if you let it sit for about an hour, it will get more syrupy, and I can show you what it looks like. This I made about an hour ago with the other pint, and you can see the juices. Actually, I don't know if you can see that, but see those in there. But it's like half, there's a lot of juice. There's like juice up to there, just from the sugar being added to it. It's really cool how that works. But and this little strawberry sauce is great for shortcakes, but it's also great for putting on yogurt or making like a little yogurt parfait where you put a little bit of yogurt. Like I love that Side Hill maple yogurt right now. It's so yummy. Take a little of that, put some of this strawberry sauce on top, and then put a little granola on it too, and it makes a terrific healthy breakfast. So, okay, so we're gonna set that aside. And then the next part of the recipe is to make the whipped cream. And I got this started a little bit already because I didn't want you to just sit here listening to the machine running. But to make whipped cream, is you start with just a container, a pint of whipping cream. And it should be really cold, and the bowl should be cold too. And you pour it in, and you add a little bit of vanilla, just a little bit of vanilla, and a little bit of sugar, like about a tablespoon of sugar, and maybe a capful of vanilla. And then you mix it up. And you want to use the mix attachment, or if you have a handheld mixer, you can use that too, but have this sort of whisk-looking paddle. Not the paddle, but more of the whisk. And I'm just going to run this. I started this a little bit, and I'm going to run it for you so you can see. And you want to put it into the lock mode if you have a stand-up mixer like this, especially if you're working with kids. And you go to about a 6. And you want to do it until soft peaks form, and you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but I do have some nice soft peaks. I had started this before we got on. You see how it's nice. And you have to kind of watch whipped cream very carefully, because if you over mix it, which I've done before, especially when I was young, the butter, the fat separates and it becomes like this thin liquid plus butter that attaches to the whisk. So you want to really watch it closely, because especially on a warm day, it can turn to butter very quickly. And in fact, it's kind of fun to see how it makes butter. So if you have 2 containers, you can try one where you just let it mix and mix and mix, and you can see the butter, and add a little, take it off the whisk and add a little salt to it. And then with the other container, just do it enough for to make the whipped cream. You see that? So good. I love it. I think I have to have a bite. Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't heavily sweeten this. I think I just put a couple teaspoons of sugar in it. But you can taste the vanilla. It adds a lot of flavor. And if you're going to go to the trouble of making strawberry shortcake from scratch, you definitely want to make the homemade whipped cream too. Same with pies. If you make a pie or a crumble or crisp or any kind of baked dessert, it's just so much better if you put real whipped cream on it instead of the cans. The cans are fun, I guess, for like ice cream sundaes, things like that. But it's worth it to take the time to make it from scratch. Okay, so, the timer is about to go off. It's perfect timing. I'm just going to move the flour out of the way so you guys can see this. And let me check these. Okay, good. Oh, yum. Yum. You see that? They're very slightly brown. There's just a slight bit of brown on the top, like a little golden shade. But they taste, they smell so good. I wish you could smell them. You'll have to make some. Yeah. And biscuits and shortcakes are a really easy first baking recipe, because there's not a lot of ingredients, and it's ingredients you mostly have on hand. And it's a little bit like making Play-Doh, but you get to eat it, because you could really shape these into any shape that you want to, if you want to do a heart shape or anything like that. So, and I baked these just before, so you want it, when you make the strawberry shortcake, you do want it to be a little bit cool. And I let it cool for about an hour on this cooling rack. So just going to clear off my table here a little bit. And yeah, so excited. Love strawberry shortcake. Okay. And what we're going to do, show you how you assemble. Take a little bit, one shortcake like this, and we're going to cut it in half, just like that. Just carefully cut it in half. into 2. And then you can either put the whipped cream first or the strawberry first, or you can kind of layer it. I think I'm gonna layer it a little bit. So I'm gonna first put, oh, this is so nice and juicy. Put some strawberries on top. You can be pretty generous with the strawberries. See that? And then we'll put a little spoonful of whipped cream. Just a little dollop. You can always add more whipped cream if you want to, too. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more strawberry to the top. And just get a little of that juice in. See the juice there? Put it right on top so you can get a little of the juice. Yeah. I think it needs more strawberries, maybe a little more strawberries. Yum. And then you can just eat it just like that. Or I always like to garnish my desserts a little bit. And we have all this wonderful fresh mint in our garden right now. So I just, right before this, I just ran outside and picked some. And I'm just gonna snip a little bit on top as a little extra garnish. Oh, and mint smells so good. You could make a little bit of mint lemonade, where you just make lemonade and then put a little bit of mint in it, or even just lemon mint water, and that would go so well with this. Do you see that? Looks so good. I guess I need to have a taste, since you guys can't have a taste. I'll have a little taste. But I can't wait. The homemade shortcakes too taste so much better than the store-bought, because sometimes the store-bought have been sitting there for a couple days or even just one day, but these are the best to eat kind of right away. So so good. I wish you were all here to try it.
Oh, Deanna, that looks fantastic. We don't have any questions at the moment. I'm wondering if you could tell us some next recommendations for things people might cook after this. As you mentioned, it's a wonderful starter.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, everything from making your own snacks, making your own lunches, even making things like dinner. If you can raise your hand and tell your parents, offer to make dinner one night. One of the things that my girls used to love to make was peanut noodles. And peanut noodles are pretty easy. You just need peanut butter, a little bit of soy sauce, a little bit of water, and you can make a little sauce and put a little ginger and garlic in it, and then toss some noodles in it, any kind of noodles really, but Chinese noodles taste better. Put some peanuts and some cilantro on top. That's a really easy dinner, especially if somebody can help you cook the noodles. That's a great one. Another one that I love to make with my kids and with kids that I cook with is I love to make Caprese salad. It's just fresh mozzarella, tomato, and basil. And strawberries are very soft, so it's easy to cut. And same with fresh mozzarella. So it's pretty easy to just slice fresh mozzarella into little slices, or if you want to use the balls, just cutting that with a plastic picnic knife, and using cherry tomatoes too. So you could make a little salad. You could toss it all together, fresh mozzarella, halves of cherry tomatoes, and a little bit of basil, and you put some olive oil on it and a little bit of salt too. That's a great one. Trying to think, there are so many in my books. I can show you with baking class.
Yeah, those are some wonderful ideas. And actually, that kind of leads us right into a question that somebody has.
Sure.
About baking. Sophia asks, what's your favorite thing to bake?
Ooh, my favorite thing to bake. Well, I would have to say strawberry shortcake is like one of my, way up there. It's one of my favorites because it mixes something fresh with a baked good. I also like making, I love making these cinnamon muffins. It's a basic muffin, and then you can dip it in butter, and then you dip it in cinnamon sugar. And they're called French breakfast muffins, and my kids always love to make those. Those are also in baking class. but everything from making homemade Pop-Tarts with pie crust essentially, and you just put a little jam in the middle of the pie crust and you use a fork to crimp the edges. That's another one. I'm trying to think, oh, I have so many. I love to bake. Oh, and during the quarantine, I don't know about you, but we've been baking so much at home. And we've made lemon squares, we've made snickerdoodles, we've baked bread, we've made biscuits. So I just find that when there's chaos in the world like there is now, or like during the quarantine, that cooking can bring a lot of comfort, and it can kind of make you be mindful and in the moment, and it can bring joy to other people in your family too, where you can share, you can make something and bring it to them, and if they're having a hard day, it like totally turns around their day, having a little something homemade. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. These books, as Deanna mentioned, they are available at the Dickinson Memorial Library. And one person asks out there, Lisa mentions that she loves your baking class book.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
And she's made your bread too. And she wonders, how do you come up with the recipes for your books?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, a lot of times I start with something that I made when I was young, or something that I love to eat that I've maybe tried at a restaurant, or something that my kids love to make or eat. And then I usually just adapt the recipe so that they're even simpler for kids. And part of my recipe process is showing every step. So I do step-by-step photographs so that if you are a pre-reader, or if you really want to see how something is put together, that's sort of what the signature of my books is. I really slow it down and write it in kid-friendly language and show all the photographs so that it's really easy to make it. And then the kids feel like so proud of what they've made. It's easy to have success when they can follow along with the pictures.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about your books. Another thing that I love about your books is that you are gathering recipes from around the world. As I mentioned in the intro, that's kind of how you got your start with that Watson Fellowship. And I wonder, with strawberry shortcake in particular, have you found, and that seems like, in my experience, it seems like a very American thing. Have you found any adaptations from around the world?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I haven't seen a shortcake like that in other countries, but I'm thinking of this sweet potato cookie that's almost like a biscuit cookie that I have from Zimbabwe in my recipe, in my cookbook, global cooking class. And things like waffles. Waffles are kind of similar, like in the Swedish waffles have whipped cream, and then they have strawberries on top too, but it's a waffle that you make. The Belgian waffles, sorry, I said Swedish, but those are kind of similar with the topping, like you make a little bit of a sauce, and you can do that with apples or with strawberries, but putting whipped cream on the waffles, it's different, but that's what the Belgium they do. So I'm just looking quickly at my book to see if there's any other ones. I mean, there's a lot of recipes for baked goods, and I do remember in France that strawberries were popular too. So.
And for anybody who's curious about that sweet potato dish you mentioned, people might have seen recently on Google, they had a doodle about the little thumb piano. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see that, but that was from Zimbabwe too. And so you can make the connection by trying a recipe from Deanna's book and trying this little instrument.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yes. I know cooking is a great way to kind of learn about other cultures and to celebrate all the different voices and all the different tastes in our world. When I worked on this book, I was inspired by this international night that they had at Jackson Street School, which is where my kids went. And all the kids set up booths, and they had little taste test foods, and they had maps and things from the countries of their heritage. And it was a celebration right in our own community of over 50 different countries. And it was a wonderful event. And I love that food was included in it because everyone eats, and food is just a great way to kind of celebrate all of our uniqueness and just, you know, our love for each other. Really, food is a great way to kind of share love too.
Oh, I agree. That's so beautiful. And I can't let you go without asking a question I'm always curious about with authors. I'm wondering if what you're working on next.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I have a board book. It's a little toddler book that's called Food Faces. I wish I had a copy here, but it's coming out in September. But it's all these different food faces that you can make just at snack time that are really easy, that make toddlers and preschoolers feel like they're cooking, even though there's no heat involved. But it has things like a little mouse made out of a strawberry with a fruit leather tail and almond slice ears. But it's all just kind of a celebration of food and having fun in the kitchen. It's kind of enjoying the process. So.
Oh, I love it. We will definitely be on the lookout for that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great library book.
I wanted to ask about one of the recipes I saw on your website. It was like a tomato salad, and it had a lot of, yeah. And that made me think that this whole farm to table movement could work for kids too. I mean, you can grow tomatoes pretty easily, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. And actually, kids that, any kids that are in the audience, if you have a garden, just go outside, pick it, and try a recipe from a tomato that's growing in there. You can find recipes on my website for using fresh ingredients. Pick the peas. Kids that garden and cook are much more likely to try all different kinds of foods, and they're not as picky. And it's fun to just go out there and pick something, or to go to a farmer's market and choose something. Maybe it's something that you've never tried before, like kohlrabi or something, or a fresh turnip, and bring it home and work with your parents to find a recipe and taste it, because there's so many wonderful flavors in the world, and it's just great to expand our palates. It's sort of like a fun part of growing up. It's trying. I still remember when I first tasted an olive. I was always like, I don't like olives, I don't like olives. And then I tried one and I was like, oh my God, these are so good. Or picking peas. I didn't think I liked peas because, I had them, a lot of them just that were frozen, or I'd seen at my friend's house like some canned peas. But when we grew them from in our garden and we tasted them, I just fell in love with peas. So it's almost pea season too.
Oh, yes, I agree. That is great. The strawberries I showed at the beginning, I know that our audience is from all over the place, but for those of you who are in Northfield, there is a farmer's market every Thursday, and that's where I got these strawberries.
Oh, okay. And you got them on Thursday?
Yeah.
Good. So a couple days. That's another thing I wanted to mention, is that fresh strawberries, like 3 days storing them is kind of max. So when you have them, you want to cut them up and eat them as quickly as you can. Where the store-bought ones that come from California or whatever, they last a little bit longer. But I'm so glad you got them at your farmer's market.
Oh, me too. And as Deanna says, check your gardens too, your own gardens, not just the farmers markets. But I made a little video for our library listeners the other day of me playing in the garden, and we watched the peas climbing up the trellis. That beautiful time of year.
It really is. On my website too, I have some printable activities. Like I have coloring sheets of different fruits and vegetables. If you have a rainy day, like today, it's starting to pour. It's pouring out. I can see right now. But coloring, you learn about all these different fruits and vegetables by coloring things. Or I just have a farmer's market scavenger hunt on my website that's kind of fun to print out. And it says, look for the tiniest vegetable, look for the biggest vegetable. And that's kind of fun to print out. But also the recipe for this strawberry shortcake is on my website too. It's deannafcook.com. So if you want to make it and you want to print it out, that's where you can find it.
Deanna, we have another question from a watcher out there. You mentioned that as a kid, you were more tempted to cook than to maybe watch TV. And the watcher is wondering if you remember what age you started baking and if you remember some of the first things that you made.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yes. Well, I remember baking a lot with my grandmother. So I think I probably started baking when I was like 3 and helping her. And we used to make carrot cookies from scratch with her garden. She was a big gardener, so she grew like the most amazing carrots. So I do remember making carrot cookies, and they were so yummy. In fact, I should put that recipe up on my website. And then I remember wanting, probably when I was 10, really wanting that Easy Bake Oven. And I got the Easy Bake Oven and I did a lot of cooking, but I was so disappointed because the cake mixes never tasted very good. So I started making my own recipes that I put in the Easy Bake Oven. So, but you know, I think I made a lot of birthday cakes. I love to celebrate. I'm from a big family, one of 6 kids, so I love to like bake cakes and cupcakes. I think that was one of my first loves for baking. So.
Great, thank you. And can you make this recipe with other fruit? Someone suggested, what about raspberries?
Oh, that would be so yummy. Yes. Could do raspberries. You could do blueberry and raspberry. You know, 4th of July is coming up. That's kind of fun because both of them are usually in season around then. You can get the last of the strawberries and the first of the blueberries and just mix up the sauce just like this, but include the blueberries in it. Raspberries too, you could do lots of different berries in there. You could even do it with frozen berries if you want to do it in the winter. If you are picking, especially blueberries, they freeze really well. Well, strawberries freeze well too. But you could I would probably cook it over the stove top and make a little bit more, just make this, but put it over the stove top and make a little bit more of a syrup with it, with the frozen berries. But yeah, and I guess you could do it with mango or trying to think of some of the other fruits that we love here. Even banana might be kind of good. I mean, you wouldn't need to add the sugar if it was banana, but adding a little bit of banana to this would be good. So.
I was going to
local, using just local, like bananas are not local, so.
Sorry. I was going to ask about kale. I saw some kale labeled the other day, Dinosaur Kale. It sounded pretty cool. I wondered if there really is a difference among the types of kale.
Yeah, I mean, dinosaur is just a lot bigger. I'm not a real expert on kale, but I love the name Dinosaur. And so I have made kale chips with kids before with the dinosaur kale. And you just cut it off from the stem. And then I just toss it with a little bit of olive oil and salt and Parmesan, fresh Parmesan. And then you roast it essentially at a high temperature. You layer it on its sheet cake. And then you want to watch it carefully because it can burn really fast. But taking it out and it gets crispy. It gets almost like a potato chip. And it's fun. And, kale salad, too, if you cut it really small with the kids, and they can use scissors. They can just use safety scissors. Cut the leaves really small and make kind of a lemon Parmesan, almost like a Caesar type dressing. I know kids that love kale Caesar salad, for instance. And that's a fun one for kids to make. But yeah, I love the name Dinosaur Kale. Actually, if you have a CSA and you're participating in a CSA, when you get your box, definitely involve the kids in taking everything out of the box, naming it, and that's when the first time I think we had Dinosaur Kale, is it was in our CSA box. And we were like, what are we going to do with this? And that's when we made the kale chips. So.
Deanna, I'm sorry to continue to keep you away from that delicious food that you've made. It's right in front of you. But we do have another question.
Okay.
Wondering what you're looking forward to next, what fresh produce that comes out that you'll be cooking with.
Well, I'm so excited for peas, I have to say. And I don't really do a whole lot with them, but I do remember as a child just taking them out of the shells. I had my own little saucepan that was like a little saucepan. Actually, it was kind of like this size. This is just a very little one. And actually, this is really fun for kids to have a little. And just shelling the peas right into the pan and putting a tiny bit of water, just cooking it till it boils and turning off the heat and eating them with a little bit of butter and salt. So that's a wonderful, really easy recipe that kids can make on their own. But yeah, peas and in my garden right now, I have radishes that I just had a couple of, and slice those up. In France, they do this. You put a little butter on a baguette and then put a couple slices of radish on it and a little bit of chive and just eat those, and it's so yummy. And all the lettuces. I mean, wonderful lettuces that are just starting to be available in the markets. And then, of course, tomatoes and peppers. I'm not as big of a fan of squash. I was a picky eater when I was little, so I still have to find the recipes for like zucchini that I love. I do love zucchini muffin, though. So.
Yeah. When you sweeten it up, anything tastes delicious.
Anything makes it, yeah.
Deanna, do you have any stories from your travels when you were on that fellowship? Does anything come to mind that you think kids might enjoy hearing about?
Yeah, I think, well, it was really an amazing experience. I spent a whole year traveling, and I went to the South Pacific, to Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe, and Canada, and in Asia. I went to China, India, Nepal. And I think that some of the things that I found were really interesting is how first of all, how happy kids were everywhere that I went, and how all of them pretty much loved to cook and loved to share their recipes. And I would, either take the school bus with them, and I remember going in Australia and taking the school bus with these girls and talking to their whole class about cooking. And then after school, they made me these Anzac biscuits, which stood for the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, and it's just like a very simple cookie. And they made these sausage rolls. They made this whole meal, and we ate it on their trampoline, and it was really, really fun. And then in Nepal, I remember the kids making popcorn, and I was fascinated because these were Hill Tribe kids way up in the Himalayas, and they were just throwing the popcorn in this pot, and they didn't have a lid on it, and the popcorn was just flying out all over the fire, and then they put sugar on it, and it was fun. Like, they were dancing around the fire and picking the popcorn off the ground, and it was such a celebration of kids, and it was fun to see how they cooked it. And I talked about how I cooked it, with a lid or an air popper. Like, we have these fancy air pop machines, and there they don't. So I don't know. It was great to talk to kids about their kitchens and the ingredients they have available, and what their favorite foods were. So in Mexico, I remember the kids, there was this one boy that only ate rice. Like, that's all he wanted. Like, he was so picky that he only wanted rice. So put a teeny bit of salsa on it. Or he would his brother did love avocados, so they would slice open an avocado, just put a little bit of lime on it and a little salt, and that was like his favorite thing to eat. So
I have a question about the aftermath of cooking. Should the cook have to also do the dishes? And if so, do you eat first or do them after?
Every family has a different policy. I guess when you're working with kids, I get them to involved in all of it, because especially little kids, like washing the dishes is kind of fun. You just have to put a big towel, around and have a stool. But, giving dishes like a bath, you say, and making all the water super sudsy is really fun. So I make that always part of the whole activity. And then having tweens and teenagers who are cooking more independently, I do think, they can't just come in and make a disaster out of the kitchen after making chocolate chip cookies. So I pretty much say, if you're going to make the cookies, you got to do the whole thing. You got to clean up. Yeah. And the great thing about cookies is they can keep eating. They can have one right when it comes out of the oven, and then they last, hopefully, for a couple of days. So after they do the dishes, they can come back and have more.
Well, there's another question. I think this might throw me under the bus, but that's okay. Sophia's wondering, how come you're not eating that mouth-watering food that's right in front of you?
I really want to. Especially with the mint on it. So, because it's sort of rude to eat in front of other people.
Well, while you can take a nibble, and I'll tell people a little bit about our summer program. For those people who are in Northfield, where you're going to receive a mailing from the library that has all sorts of fun stuff you can do over the summer. We'll start right after July 4th, and one whole week is going to be dedicated to food. And that'll be a really fun time for you to find Deanna's cookbooks and challenge yourself to make something new.
Yes, and share your recipes with me and your photos. I love to see pictures of kids cooking. It brings me a lot of joy, and it's inspiring to see what you've made. So please share those. Wonderful.
What's the best way for them to share with you?
They can just share it through my website. I have like a contact form, or you can share it on Instagram on Deanna F Cookbooks, and just tag me on Instagram. That's fun. I love to see those. In fact, recently I've been getting tagged so many times, and it's wonderful to see all the kids all around the world making the recipes. So yeah. So anyways, but thank you so much for having me. It's I hope that whoever's watching got some good information out of it, and I'm glad you're recording it, because I think a lot of people will watch it who weren't able to tune in. I know there's a lot happening today. But I really appreciate, I love supporting local libraries, and I love how libraries bring access to everyone. And and thank you, Matt and Lisa, for inviting me to participate. So it's a great program.
Oh, we're so lucky to have you. Deanna, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Happy cooking, everybody. I don't know what I'm going to do with all my leftovers.
Send them over.
Everyone lives in Northampton. You can stop by.
Thank you so much for doing this. It was really great, and it makes me hungry.
You're welcome. Have a great day.